Have you ever asked yourself, if life is just pain and disappointment, what's the point of waking up tomorrow? You're not alone. Many of us, at some point, whisper this question in the quiet hours of the night. In the face of suffering, meaning feels like a distant illusion. Joy seems like a passing visitor. And existence, a burden. But what if that question itself is the beginning of freedom? Welcome to Lotus of Dharma, where ancient Buddhist wisdom meets the struggles of modern life. If you've ever felt broken, lost, or simply tired of chasing happiness that never lasts, then this video is for you. Today, we turn to the Buddha, not just the serene statue on your shelf, but the living man who faced suffering just like you and me. And through that pain, discovered something life-changing. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video if it touches your heart. It helps us bring more teachings to those who are silently struggling. Now, let's take a breath and return to the question, if life is suffering, then why live at all? The Buddha, in his profound compassion, did not offer us false hope or soothing illusions. He did not say that life would become beautiful if we simply believed hard enough. Instead, with a steady gaze of awakened awareness, he invited us to look deeply into the very fabric of our experience. And there, he pointed to the truth that many would rather avoid. Life, as we commonly live it, contains suffering. He called this dukkha. Not merely pain or sadness, but a subtle, pervasive dissatisfaction, a quiet restlessness that follows us even in moments of success, even in the arms of those we love. It is the sense that something is missing, even when everything seems perfect on the surface. This suffering shows up in countless forms. When we lose someone we cherish, our heart breaks. When we desire something desperately and cannot attain it, we'd ache with longing. But even when our desires are fulfilled, joy fades, the novelty wears off, and we are left chasing the next thing, the next thrill, the next illusion of permanence. The Buddha was not being negative, he was being honest. He did not condemn life, he revealed its nature. He saw that suffering is not a punishment, nor a mistake, but a consequence of how we relate to the world. We cling. We grasp. We demand that life be other than it is. And in doing so, we create our own discontent. This is the tragedy of craving. The moment we desire, we also fear. We fear loss. We fear change. We fear not having. And thus, even our joys are tinged with anxiety. The Buddha's insight was revolutionary not because it was new, but because it was clear. He simply dared to see without distortion. He saw that everything conditioned, everything born, everything made carries within it the seeds of its own dissolution. And when we try to hold on to what is fleeting, we suffer. But here is the subtle brilliance. He was not saying that life is suffering. He was saying that attachment to life, resistance to its impermanence, is the root of our pain. So many of us live as though we cannot run aging, loss, and death. We numb ourselves, distract ourselves, indulge in fantasies of control. Yet all the while, life moves unchanging, shifting, dissolving, and we, in our blindness, call this unfair. But the Buddha saw clearly, it is not unfair. It is simply so. And in that truth lies the first step toward liberation. For when we stop fighting reality, when we stop expecting the impermanent to be permanent, a great peace can arise. Not the peace of denial, but the peace of understanding. To live is to experience dukkha. But to awaken is to see dukkha without fear, and to let that insight soften the heart, open the mind, and begin the journey inward toward freedom that does not depend on conditions. This is not pessimism. This is the beginning of wisdom. And so, having seen the truth of dukkha not as an abstract idea, but as an undeniable reality woven into every breath. Siddhartha could no longer remain in the palace of illusions. The insight did not depress him. It awakened him. What he had glimpsed was not the end of hope, but the beginning of a deeper search. And that search began with a choice so radical, it would echo through the centuries. Siddhartha was not a peasant burdened by poverty. He was a prince. Draped in silk, surrounded by music, bathed in comfort. Everything the world promises as happiness was already his. Servants at his feet. Dancers to please the eye. Gardens of endless bloom. Yet none of it could shield him from reality. One day, he left the palace walls and he saw a sick man. A bent, wrinkled elder. A lifeless corpse. For the first time, he truly saw. And with that seeing, came a trembling awareness. No one escapes suffering, not the rich, not the powerful, not even those most loved. This realization did not break him. It transformed him. Many would have turned away, chosen distraction, tried to forget. But Siddhartha turned inward. He did not leave the palace because he was bitter. He left because he was honest. Because something in him knew that all the gold in the world could not buy peace of mind. He walked away from comfort not to escape life, but to understand it. He walked barefoot into forests, not to punish himself, but to purify his vision. He sat with sages, not to collect ideas, but to question everything he had ever been taught. Was there a way to live not ruled by fear, not enslaved by craving? Was there a path where the heart could be free, even when the world is not? He wasn't seeking heaven. He was seeking truth. And that, dear listener, is where the story of the Buddha truly begins, not with miracles or divine visions, but with a simple man walking away from privilege, into the unknown, driven not by despair but by the most noble kind of courage, the courage to face reality as it is. This is why we follow his footsteps. Not because he claimed perfection, but because he was willing to question everything, including himself. And in doing so, he discovered not just the nature of suffering but the nature of freedom. And so we follow Siddhartha deeper, not into forests of silence, but into the very structure of the mind itself. For the truth he discovered was not external. It was not hidden in the stars or guarded by gods. It was here, burning quietly within each of us. This, he saw clearly, the root of suffering is craving. The Pali word is tan. It means thirst, not the kind that water quenches, but a hunger that has no end. A gnawing sense that something is missing, and if only we could have that one thing, we would finally be complete. But it never ends there. We crave not only food and wealth and touch. We crave certainty in a world that shifts like sand. We crave control over the uncontrollable. We crave to be seen, admired, remembered. We crave for life to slow down, or speed up, or turn back time. Even when we laugh, there is fear the joy will fade. Even when we love, there is anxiety we might lose. We fear being alone. We fear being forgotten. We fear impermanence, and yet everything we touch is impermanent. This craving is not neutral. It is a fire. The Buddha described it not as a metaphor, but as a lived reality, a flame that consumes our clarity, that smolders beneath even our pleasures. It burns through our peace, our patience, our presence. And like a flame fed by wind, the more we chase, the more it grows. But here lies the quiet revolution of his insight. If suffering is caused not by life itself but by the way we cling to it, then we are not condemned. We are free. We do not have to add more to find peace. We do not have to fix the world or fix ourselves. We only need to understand the nature of this craving and begin to release our grip. To see craving clearly is already to loosen its hold. Like waking from a fever dream, we realize no thing, no person, no future can fill the void that craving itself creates. It is not the world that torments us, but our refusal to let the world be as it is. This is not about passivity. It is about wisdom. When we stop demanding life be different, we begin to live it fully. When we stop grasping for the next moment, we can finally inhabit this one. Tan is not evil, it is simply a misunderstanding. A confused belief that happiness lies out there, just beyond our reach. But when the Buddha saw this thirst for what it was, he did not judge it. He sat with it. He breathed through it. And slowly, he let it go. And in that letting go, something miraculous happened. Not emptiness, but spaciousness. Not numbness, but freedom. The fire grew quiet. The mind became still. So ask yourself, gently, what are you clinging to? What fire are you feeding? The way out is not in acquiring more, but in needing less. The way out is not to quench the fire with desire, but to stop feeding it altogether. This is the beginning of liberation, not in resisting the fire, but in understanding its cause, and choosing, with each breath, not to add more wood. And so, when we begin to see the fire of craving clearly, the next question naturally arises: what now? What do we do with this thirst, this longing, this deep ache for something more? The Buddha's answer was disarmingly simple: let go. But let us be clear, letting go is not the same as giving up. It is not defeat, nor apathy, nor resignation. True letting go is an act of profound strength. It is not the collapse of hope, but the quiet unfolding of wisdom. It is the moment we stop trying to force life to fit our desires, and begin to bow gracefully, gently to the truth of how things are. Letting go is giving in not to despair, but to impermanence, to the flowing, ever-changing nature of existence. It is the courage to soften our grip, not because life has stopped hurting, but because we understand that clinging only deepens the wound. There is an old story told among monks. A man walks through the forest with a heavy stone pressed at his chest. Every step is painful. His arms tremble. His breath is short. And yet, when asked why he doesn't put it down, he says, "Because it's mine." This is how we carry our suffering. We hold on to old herds, old identities, old dreams. Not because they nourish us, but because we have come to believe they define us. And so we carry the stone, and we suffer not because life is cruel, but because we refuse to release what no longer serves us. To let go is to recognize that nothing belongs to us, not our possessions, not our youth, not even the people we love. Everything arises, stays for a while, and then departs. This is the dance of existence. And when we resist it, we suffer. But when we flow with it, something remarkable happens. We begin to taste peace. It's not a peace that depends on circumstances. It's not the peace of a quiet room or a good day. It is a deeper peace, the kind that can hold both laughter and tears, both hope and loss, without needing to control or fix anything. Letting go means we stop demanding that things last forever. It means we stop believing that we must be untouched by sorrow to be whole. We begin to understand that endings are not failures, they are simply part of the rhythm of life. And when we allow this truth to settle into our bones, we become free. Not because the pain disappears, but because we are no longer fighting it. We become like the open sky, vast, spacious, unmoved by the passing clouds. Letting go is not a one-time act. It is a practice, a returning, a reminder. Each breath, an opportunity to release something, a thought, a story, a fear. Each moment, an invitation to soften, to surrender, to trust. Even in pain, we can be present. Even in sorrow, we can be awake. Letting go does not mean we stop loving. It means we love without attachment, without trying to possess what cannot be possessed. So ask yourself gently, what am I holding so tightly that it hurts? What would happen if I simply let it fall? The answer is not in holding more, but in releasing what weighs us down. In the quiet act of letting go, we do not lose. We return to presence, to peace, to the natural unfolding of life, just as it is. From letting go, a natural wisdom begins to bloom not as a belief, but as a way of living. And it was precisely this insight that guided the Buddha to one of his most profound discoveries, the middle way. Before his awakening, Siddhartha had swung between two extremes. First, a life of luxury sensual pleasures, comfort, and distraction. Then, a life of harsh self-denial starving his body, denying every impulse, nearly dying on the forest floor. And in both, he found no peace. Neither indulgence nor punishment could lead to liberation. It was only when he nearly collapsed from hunger, weak and hollow, that a simple moment revealed the truth. A young girl offered him a bowl of milk and rice. And as he accepted it not with greed, not with guilt, but with clarity, he realized, suffering does not end by adding more suffering. And joy does not last when it is built on clinging. So he chose another way. Not the path of excess, nor the path of deprivation, but the path of balance. A way that honors the body without worshiping it, that respects pleasure without being enslaved by it. A way where we neither escape life nor drown in it, but instead, walk through it, awake. The middle way is not mediocrity. It is not indecision. It is a radical clarity that avoids the traps on both sides, the craving for more, and the fear of feeling anything at all. It's a path that demands we stay present with the truth, without swinging wildly in reaction. Imagine a lute. If the strings are pulled too tight, they snap. If they are too loose, they make no sound. But tuned just right, they produce music clear, resonant, alive. This is the teaching the Buddha gave to his first 5 disciples. And this is the tuning we must learn in our own lives. To walk the middle way is to drink tea with both hands fully present, fully alive, feeling the warmth seep into your palms, knowing it will soon be gone, and loving it all the same. It is the grace of meeting each moment with neither grasping nor rejection, but with soft attention. It does not mean we avoid joy, or that we'd ignore sorrow. It means we see both for what they are, passing visitors, and we learn to welcome them without fear. It means we'd eat when we are hungry, sleep when we are tired, and listen when the heart whispers truth. In this path, there is no rigid dogma, no list of forbidden pleasures. There is only the question, does this nourish clarity? Does this lead to freedom? The middle way invites us to live wisely, not recklessly, not rigidly, but responsively, lovingly. It asks us to trust that we do not have to break ourselves to be spiritual. Nor do we have to drown in the world's temptations to feel alive. There is a middle space, soft and spacious, where the mind is steady and the heart is open. And in that space, life can unfold not as something to conquer or avoid, but as something to understand. This is the middle way, not too tight, not too loose. Just enough. Just here. Just now. As we follow the Buddha along the middle way, we come to the heart of his realization, the profound and often misunderstood teaching of Nirvana. For many, the word conjures images of a faraway paradise, a blissful realm untouched by pain, perhaps even a kind of spiritual heaven. But the Buddha never described it in such terms. Nirvana is not a place you go. It is a state of being. Or more precisely, it is the extinguishing of all that keeps us from truly being. The word nirvana means to blow out, like the quiet snuffing of a candle flame. But it is not the flame of life that is extinguished. It is the flame of craving, aversion, and delusion, the three poisons that keep our minds in turmoil, constantly reaching, resisting, and forgetting. Nirvana is not a reward for good behavior. It is not a place reserved for saints. It is the natural state of the heart when the fires have gone out, when desire no longer controls us, when identity no longer confines us, when illusion no longer blinds us. It is when the wind of wanting no longer moves the flame of the mind, when the endless seeking comes to rest. This is not a cold emptiness. It is the most spacious freedom. In nirvana, we are not erased, we are revealed. The noise of me and mine fades, and in its place, there is a vast, quiet awareness, a gentle clarity untouched by the world's chaos. Nirvana means the end of needing life to go your way, the end of struggling to be someone, the end of the inner war, the constant tug-of-war between what is and what we wished would be. And in that stillness, there is peace. Not the peace of escape, but the peace of acceptance. So often, we believe that freedom lies in changing our circumstances. We think we will be free when the job improves, when the pain stops, when the past is healed. But the Buddha pointed to another kind of freedom, a freedom within the fire, not from it. A freedom that arises not because life is easy, but because we have stopped resisting what is. To realize nirvana is to see through the illusion that happiness comes from getting what we want. It is to understand that our suffering was never caused by life itself, but by the way we tried to control it. And so, nirvana is not somewhere in the clouds. It is here, now, in this breath, when the mind no longer clings. It is in the space between thoughts, when we let the moment be as it is. It is the still point behind the eyes, watching without judgment, without fear. The Buddha described it not in flowery metaphors, but in simple terms: the unborn, the unconditioned, the deathless. Because it is not made of anything that can decay. It is not touched by time or loss. It is not born, and so it does not die. But make no mistake, nirvana is not an escape from life. It is the full embrace of life, without attachment. It is being completely alive, and yet completely free. Feeling everything, and grasping nothing. To taste even a moment of this is to understand why the Buddha smiled, not because life became perfect, but because he no longer needed it to be. So do not seek nirvana in the sky. Do not imagine it as some distant reward. It is closer than your next breath. It is not about becoming something new, it is about letting go of everything you are not. And in that letting go, you will find something that was never lost. Peace not as a destination, but as your true nature, uncovered. If nirvana is the extinguishing of craving, then what remains? What does the awakened life feel like? If the Buddha didn't offer a guarantee of constant joy, what did he offer in its place? He offered something far deeper than fleeting pleasure. He offered equanimity, a quiet, unwavering steadiness of heart. Not the wild swings of elation and despair, but the calm center that remains still, even as the storm rages around it. This, the Buddha taught, is the new definition of happiness. Not the shallow happiness of getting what we want, but the profound contentment of no longer being ruled by our wants. Not the brittle smile that demands life go our way, but the gentle strength to sit with whatever arises: grief, joy, boredom, beauty, and to meet it all with compassion. True happiness, in the Buddhist path, is not about always feeling good. It is about being free, even when we don't. Imagine yourself sitting quietly while the rain falls. You don't beg the clouds to leave. You don't chase the sun. You simply sit, breathe, and feel the cool drops on your skin. That is freedom. That is the heart at peace. Equanimity does not mean indifference. It does not mean we stop caring. In fact, it allows us to care more deeply because we are no longer caring from a place of fear or need, but from clarity and presence. To be equanimous is to love without clinging. To feel sadness without being swept away. To be aware of your joy and to let it pass without despair when it goes. It is a way of walking through life that says, I will not be hardened by pain. I will not be fooled by pleasure. I will meet each moment with a steady heart and a soft gaze. So yes, life includes suffering. The Buddha never denied this. But life also includes the opportunity to wake up, to rise above our habitual reactions, to touch something deeper than circumstance. It offers the chance to feel everything not because we must fix or control it, but because we are finally spacious enough to allow it all. You can cry without drowning. You can smile without certainty. You can love someone even as they leave. You can feel grief and still bow to the beauty of what was shared. This is what it means to live with awakened joy. Not because life has become easier, but because you have become more open, more resilient, more present. Happiness, as the Buddha revealed, is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of wisdom. The knowing that whatever comes, you will meet it with peace, not because you are untouched, but because you are unshaken. That, dear friend, is the truest happiness of all. And so we return to the question that began this journey: if life is suffering, then why live? The Buddha's answer was never to turn away from life, but to turn toward it, fully, fearlessly, tenderly. Because only within this fleeting, imperfect, often painful existence does the opportunity for awakening arise. You cannot reach liberation in a fantasy. You cannot find wisdom in a realm of dreams. It is only here in the raw, unfiltered reality of being human that the seeds of freedom can take root. This breath, this sensation, this difficult morning, this quiet joy, this heartbreak, this silence, these are not obstacles to your path. They are the path. Life is not a punishment for some forgotten sin. It is not a prison sentence we must endure. It is a practice, a sacred training ground where we learn how to open, soften, release, and remember who we truly are. Each time you choose presence over distraction, compassion over anger, acceptance over resistance, you are walking the same path the Buddha walked beneath a Bodhi tree. You are not here to avoid pain. You are here to transform your relationship to it. To no longer see it as the enemy, but as the teacher. And in doing so, you awaken not away from life, but through it. Yes, life contains suffering, but it also contains the courage to stay, the wisdom to see clearly, the love that does not cling, the freedom that arises not from running away, but from turning inward. This moment, no matter how ordinary, is sacred, because it holds the possibility of seeing differently, of breaking the cycle, of choosing stillness in the chaos, tenderness in the grief, spaciousness in the noise. So if you ask, why live? The answer is simple and profound. Because this life is the doorway. And awakening is what you came here for. So then, what is the point of life? Perhaps it is not to chase happiness, nor to avoid sorrow, but to see both as part of the same path, the path of awakening. Perhaps the purpose is not to fix life, but to understand it. To meet suffering not as a curse, but as a doorway. A teacher. A mirror reflecting the places we still cling, the illusions we still carry. Pain is not the opposite of peace. It is what brings us to the edge of ourselves where something softer, truer, begins to emerge. The Buddha did not find freedom by running from the world, but by sitting fully inside it, without resistance, with an open heart. So the next time the question arises, what's the point of living? Let it not be a cry of despair, but a call to presence. The point is not to escape suffering. The point is to awaken through it. To love anyway. To let go anyway. To stay awake, breathing, and free in the middle of it all. If this teaching spoke to you, please share it. Somewhere, someone is silently struggling, and your small gesture may bring them the light they need. Subscribe to Lotus of Dharma for more gentle guidance on this sacred path. And in the comments below, we'd love to hear from you. What has your suffering taught you? May your walk be steady. May your heart remain tender. And may you discover hidden within the hardest moments the quiet seeds of liberation.